Who ask me anything about politics. My name is Jared Berenstein, and I am here to answer all of your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated they are, regardless of if you are a Democrat or a Republican, regardless of if you are an expert or just trying to learn. All of your questions are welcome here on Ask Me Anything About Politics. Politics can be very confusing to try to keep up with. There's a lot of weird nuances that you got to know, and a lot of procedural stuff and abbreviations. And if you are not, already kind of like well versed in that language of politics, then it could be really difficult to know what's going on. And to whoever just left a comment, I just got a TikTok notification that said that some comments in this live were filtered to protect the community's experience. So I don't know if what you said was offensive or not, but if it was a real question, then just go ahead and try to rephrase it, and I will do my best to give you an answer. This is not a show for fighting. This is not a show for debating. This is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions about politics. So maybe you're somebody on the right and you've always wanted to know why are Democrats the way that they are. You got a real life Democrat here that you can ask your questions to, and I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to call you a MAGA fascist or anything like that. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions. Beto4757 says, why do financially successful Americans vote for Trump if they were already successful? Well, rich people are never satiated. Generally, if you have a lot of money, you just want more money. You know, they have like this greed sickness where they just like they can never fill the hole that is inside them with enough billions and billions of dollars, and so they just want more. And a lot of them are even worse than that. A lot of them view us all as like their cattle to just create profits for them, and then afterwards we can just go fucking die. And so yeah, and so they vote for Republicans because of that. They vote for Trump because of that. Thank you for your question, Beto. Really appreciate you being here. And your relation to that Beto? Obviously not, because you don't have the same last name as him. All right, we are off to a ripping start, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Everyone is welcome. Beto says, I believe Trump is a better salesman than a politician. I mean, do you count as a good salesman if you have just a massive platform and you lie? Like, I don't know if I would qualify that as being a good salesman. To me, a good salesman is somebody who you walk into their store, you leave with a car. What Trump has done is just increase his notoriety over just like decades of being like one of the biggest pieces of shit in the world. He created this idea of him being a successful and wealthy businessman, and then once he had the eyeballs of millions of people, he just started lying. And then all of those lies got bought up by a certain group of people. And then there's a new sucker born every day. And so he just keeps on lying and keeps on suckering in suckers. So yeah, I don't want to give Donald Trump any more credit than he is due, because I feel like a lot of people already do give him more credit than he deserves. Beto, thank you. Ella says, what do you think about the filibuster? I have been saying that we need to get rid of the filibuster for a really long time. I understand that if we get rid of the filibuster now, it kind of unleashes the Republican Party to pass whatever psychotic shit that they want. But I think a couple of things. Number one, it is important that we recognize that they have the power to kill a filibuster because they have been artificially extending this government shutdown. Trump just admitted on Truth Social, I think last night or today, that the filibuster could be gotten rid of and that they could end the shutdown by themselves. So I think that's important also. And number two is I feel like there's a real strong disconnect between things that happen in government and the people who are responsible for those things, where I kind of feel like if you let the Republican Party govern the way that they want to govern, they're maybe going to piss off a lot of people. And so I don't know. Like, I think an argument could be made that letting them pass awful legislation is probably better for communicating to the American people, like, this is what this party is, this is who they are. Ella. So yeah, Ella, I say get rid of the filibuster, get rid of it now, get rid of it when we have Democrats in control. I do not care. McBob K says, here, spot on. Thank you, McBob. Black Kraz, can't pronounce your last name, says up. Is that because you requested to come up? Mr. Craj. It is because you requested to be up. I usually don't take people Black Craj. If I do, I'm very mercurial about it. Like I just decide to do so randomly. So if you stick around, then potentially I will let you up. But I am going to spend the majority of the time in the beginning focusing on these comments. Kai says, thoughts on Abigail Spanberger? I actually don't really remember who she is. The lobotomy giver says, should we allow each other to eat candle wax? I mean, I don't think it's healthy, but I don't think that you eating candle wax ruins my life at all. So I guess go for it, I suppose. Kai says thoughts on the Virginia election. I mean, I think that where all of these elections are concerned, we have, generally speaking, a relatively good Democratic candidate and an absolute psychopath on the Republican side. And so, if you live in Virginia, if you live in New Jersey, and vote for the Democrat. That's what you should do. Imaginic says, will we ever have a third party option? So generally speaking, Imaginic, third parties don't really do a good job of making themselves competitive. Like they just pop up every 4 years to do these ego driven cash grab spoiler candidate runs for president. The only exception that I know about is the Working Families Party. Until we can get ranked choice voting, there's no way for third parties to be competitive unless they, spend decades like building up that kind of support. And the Republican Party is trying to make ranked choice voting illegal. So if you want more options, if you want other parties to be available, the best way out of this is through. You got to vote for Democrats so that they can make ranked choice voting available federally. Okay. Ecuadorian baseball pitcher, good to see you again, says, I am not part of a redneck agenda. I never accused you of that. Ecuadorian baseball pitcher says, Jarrett, as Green Day says, I'm not part of a redneck agenda. We're happy to have you here, Ecuadorian, and I never assumed that you were. Kevin says, yo, let me join. I have an easy way to fix it. No, Kevin, I almost never have people up, but I'm very mercurial about it. So if you stick around, maybe I will let you up, maybe I won't. WMG says the Democrats are now the anti-American Communist Party. No, that is not true, WMG. Ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Short says, what does Russ Vought do? Russ Vought, however you pronounce his name. I forget what his official title is, but he is kind of like one of the architects of Project 2025. He is basically kind of like working on doing Project 2025 for the Trump White House. Mello says, thoughts on Mamdani? I like Mamdani a lot. I like politicians that are like Mamdani, in addition to Mamdani. And so I think that people need to recognize, though, that the billionaires are not going to be done with Mamdani, even if he wins the election. So they're going to try to torpedo his agenda. They're going to pay a bunch of people to write op-eds about the failed promise of Zohran Mamdani. And people say Democratic Socialists never get anything done. Zohran Mamdani is proving them right, stupid shit like that. And they probably already have the drafts written right now, and they're just waiting for something to happen where they can publish it. So yeah, if you like Zohran, if you like politicians like him, it's not enough to just vote for them. It's not enough to donate your time and money. Like, you have to be with them after the election as well. I learned in 2008 that once a very cool politician wins an election, then that's not the end of things. I just threw my hands up and I was like, great, we brought Barack Obama, problem solved. What's up, Observe Games over on Twitch? Thank you for being here. Okay, Felipeg says, what would you label yourself as politically? Progressive Democrat. K Himchi says, thoughts on America making good trade deal with China, like rare earth minerals. So, I generally come down on the side of trade deals. I think we are moving towards globalization in a way that is impossible to avoid. But if you're talking about the very specific trade deal that the Trump organization just negotiated with China, China just fucking took us to the cleaners, man. Trump is a bad negotiator when he's dealing with somebody who also has a strong government behind him. Like he bends the knee for Putin, he bends the knee for Xi, he bends the knee for Netanyahu. It is only people that try to play ball with him from smaller countries that he ends up shitting all over. But yeah, he basically created this like stupid trade war with China. And China was like, how about we end the trade war? And also you send me some of those really cool computer chips that you use for artificial intelligence. And Trump was like, deal, gotcha, buddy. So it's like, we got nothing, China got everything. It's like, what was the point here, you know? Okay, Skywalker Luke says, is it the, I don't know what those emojis mean, but I have been told that maybe they're like anti-Semitism coded. I don't really remember. Let's see here. Kevin Kritzberg says George Soros is the one world government man. Google it. That's not a question. It's also kind of like anti-Semitic conspiracy theory coded, Kevin. So ask a question or I will boot you. Felipeg says, what do you like specifically about Mamdani in terms of policies, state-run grocery stores, rent bus, etc.? What I like about Mamdani is that he's focused on affordability, which is something that every politician in the Democratic Party is, but is not great at communicating necessarily. And he's very aggressive about affordability. Like he's got cool, big new ideas that he's like willing to try to help alleviate some of the burden of the cost of living crisis that the Republican Party and Trump have put us in, and billionaires and giant corporations have put us in. Whereas a lot of other, Democratic politicians, they will make affordability part of their platform, but their stuff tends to be a little bit, I don't know, safer, more careful. Maybe they're not as aggressive in messaging it. They try to talk about everything. And Mamdani's like, well, affordability is maybe the number one thing, so we're gonna fucking do that. He also seems just like a regular ass person, which I love. I love my politicians not sounding like politicians. He's young, and I'm for generational change for politicians as well. Right. Skywalker says we need better antitrust laws. That's what we need. I mean, we had it. We had it during the Biden administration, but people voted for Donald Trump instead. Anti-fascist 25 says I trust Red China more than I trust our White House residents. It's so weird to call it Red China. I mean, it's like, I trust any stranger on the street more than I trust the Trump administration. Not again says he sounds like a politician. Be for real. No, he doesn't. Angie Reno says, "What are you, his brother?" No, I'm not. We have different skin tones. Skywalker says, "You mean China that kills opposition?" I mean, if you think that Trump wouldn't, you're kidding yourself. And also Russia does as well, and Trump is aligned with Russia. Austin Wheat says, "Do you actually believe we get a choice in who gets voted?" Yes, 100% we do. And we can see that our choices matter depending on who wins elections. There are people alive today because of the Affordable Care Act, which is only possible because people voted for Democrats. And there are women who are dead today because of abortion bans that were only possible because people voted for Republicans. So your vote matters. It makes a difference who you vote for. Vote. Let's see here. Austin Wheat says he's not awake yet, y'all. All right, if you say so. Ask a question, I'm going to boot you. GXG says, "Go become a politician, bro." I don't know. Doesn't seem like my my fate. Doesn't seem like my destiny. God is King says, "Do you think the food stamps are the Democrats' fault?" No. I mean, food stamps by themselves are kind of like progressive legislation, which I believe came out of a Democratic president originally, but food stamps are not a problem. Food stamps are good. We need a social safety net. Okay, Observe Game says if Democrats are responsible for the shutdown because they didn't vote for the Republican budget, does that make the Republicans equally as responsible because they didn't vote for the Democrats' budget? I mean, an argument could be made. Observe Games. Yeah. I mean, if you're just trying to like argue the legitimacy of blaming Democrats for the shutdown, you're fighting an uphill battle. The people who want to believe that the Republicans are responsible are going to believe that. The people that want to believe the Democrats are responsible are going to believe that. And there's no, like logistical, logic paths that you can draw that will open people's eyes to that. Felipeg says, "Do you let people up on stream for debate or just this type of open forum Q&A stream?" It is almost exclusively open forum Q&A stream. Sometimes I have people up depending on my mood, but I'm mercurial about it. Yeah, that's basically it. Also, I don't believe that debates are productive. I think debates are kind of stupid. It's, government is not a sport. Debating is not a sport. We're supposed to be actually trying to figure out what's going on and what is best for people in this country and everywhere. And so why do we need to have like a brawl who can own the other person the most wins. I guess it's like, I don't know. It's kind of fucking stupid. You know, you want to argue that this policy is good. I want to argue this policy is bad. But while that's happening, this policy is either being enacted or not, and real people are actually suffering or not. So how about we just like look at the data instead? Okay, Echo says thoughts on Palantir. So Donald Trump and the Trump administration are in bed with um, tech billionaires who are allowing the government to use massively invasive surveillance technology on American citizens, and Palantir is one example of that. And so, if you're somebody who values the right to privacy, if you are worried about government overreach, snooping into your phone and your computer and shit like that, then you should vote for Democrats because the Trump administration is just giving all of your data and all access to all of your information to the highest bidder. Okay, user a bunch of numbers says, get off the couch, please vote in every election. Agreed. I completely fucking agree. Yeah, but I don't think that voting is enough. If voting is the only thing that you can do, then please just go vote. But if you have gas in the tank to do other things as well, we need as many people doing the work as possible to stop this administration from turning us into modern day Russia. Felopeg says, who would you like to see the Democrats run in 28? So the Democrats don't run people for elections. People run, and then the voters vote in the primary, and then that's who decides who runs. And I don't really have any like politicians that I'm like wish listing for 28, particularly because I'm just trying to get everybody focused on 26. We got midterm elections coming up in about a year, and we need everybody boots on the ground doing the work of making sure that Democrats sweep it, because otherwise we're fucked. Okay, Skywalker Luke says, who do you think is wanting policies for mass surveillance? Oracle and Palantir. It's Trump. It's Trump and Republicans. Absolutely. They have you guys should check out a movie called The Lives of Others about like the surveillance states during, East Germany, the Stasi, the East German police and shit like that. There are limitations to that kind of authoritative state because the technology didn't exist, but the technology exists now. And so they want to do the worst version of that, like 1984 shit. Christina says, great movie. It was a great movie. James Francis says, how did Kamala get in without a primary? That was a especially unique situation where her president that she was the vice president for decided to drop out. So she was the normal person to take over at that point. There were less than 110 days left until the election. So the DNC made the best. They did the best that they could with a really terrible situation. Shork says, do you believe the server room theory at the East Wing of the White House? I think there's a lot of really weird things about the East Wing construction. I have not settled on a specific theory or seen any data to suggest that it is one specific thing. Let's see here. Brer Brick says Kamala was not voted for. She was installed. It felt like. Brer Brick, I understand why it would feel like that, but let me ask you this. Is there something else that you think the DNC should have done in that situation, Brer Brick? Let's see here. Dan Blackbird says, watch the original Lives of Others, not the remake. When did the remake come out? Because the one that I saw was like 2008 or something like that. Pokemon fan says, what do you think of Dems refusing to open the government by voting yes on a clean CR bill? Couple things. Pokemon fan, number one, it's the Republican Party that has shut down the government. They are in control of the government. They have all three branches of government. They could end the filibuster. They could end the filibuster and end the shutdown yesterday if they wanted to. But what do I think about Democrats refusing to sign on to a CR, a clean CR? I think that they are taking a stand for American citizens who do not want their health care costs to skyrocket if the Affordable Care Act subsidies are not extended. And the Republican Party, who doesn't give a shit about Americans' healthcare costs skyrocketing, are communicating to me that they want Americans to suffer. And if Democrats won't let them suffer through higher health care costs, then they will make Americans suffer through a government shutdown. So you've got one party who is totally fine with American suffering and another party that is playing hardball to try to stop American suffering. And so I'm going to vote for I'm going to vote for the Democrats because they are trying to end suffering. Political Alpha says, can you name me 5 policies why Kamala would have been a better candidate? I can, Political Alpha. Felipeg says, do you think Kamala could win a general election in 2028? I don't know. I think that when you lose an election, there's kind of like a stink on you. And I think that some people are still very upset about the way that her campaign was run, even though I think she did the best that she could with 107 days. Political Alpha says, well, can you name them? Yes, I can. Stu Fred says, clean CR only requires simple majority. I don't know if that's true, actually. Mikey Shadow says, Dem Senate is causing suffering. No, they're trying to prevent people from suffering from tripled healthcare costs. Lisa Calcagano says, Blue Jays or Dodgers? I don't follow sports. Political Alpha Male says, okay, name them. No, I don't. I'm not a dancing monkey for you, Political Alpha. Zany says, why do people say bombing cartel boats is unconstitutional when due process is only for people on U.S. soil? So that's not actually true, Zany. There are international agreements that we need to abide by, rules of war and conflict and respecting nation sovereignty. And if a nation's citizens they have a boat in international waters, other governments are not allowed to just murder those people unilaterally. They don't get to decide to do that. So yeah, it is unconstitutional. It is, it's just extrajudicial murders that the Trump administration is doing. Okay. Ryan says, so far I hear claims, but nothing of substance. If you ever need any data to back up my claims, Ryan, send me a DM and I will send you all of the data. I don't have everything memorized right now. I'm not a human computer. And I also know pretty confidently that you are not going to message me because people come on my live streams. They say, where's the data? And then I never hear from them again. John says, Trump's brain was left on his parents' bed sheets. That's pretty funny. Dom says, who is your favorite president in history? Oh, I don't know if I have a favorite president. I like all the good ones, FDR, Obama, Biden. Even the bad ones had like good things about them, like Clinton. We had unprecedented economic prosperity. JFK was like cool, young, progressive. LBJ signed a bunch of, civil rights legislation. That's pretty cool. Curvy Countess says energy costs going up for all of us in the US. That is excellent. That is accurate. Not excellent. It is actually terrible. John says Nixon was better than Trump. Yeah, a shoe is better than Trump, John. William Gibson says Democrats are the problem in this country. That is not true, William. Also, that's not a question. So ask a question or you're going to get booted. Jeffrey Shelton says Carter too. I like Carter. I need to learn more about his presidency because people tell me that he was a good guy but a bad president, and I kind of don't believe it because I just feel like the system has a way of framing good people and forcing them to do a bad job instead. So I need to look more into that. Stu Fred says, do all maggot solutions always require imprisonment, violence, and outlawing? I mean, that's, and stealing taxpayer money and putting it in Trump's pockets. Let's see here. Xander says, thoughts on Medicaid for this month? I have no idea. I don't know where the legislation stands, where the funding is, both in regards to how the big beautiful bill cut funding and also as like how it works in the shutdown. Like, I'm just not sure. Dino says evidence that Trump is pocketing taxpayer dollars. Absolutely, Dino. There are so many examples of this. I think the clearest is the fact that he is suing his own Justice Department for $230 million. And he is the one who gets to decide if our taxpayers get to go into his pocket. There you go. Felipeg says, what do you think about Gustavo Petro? I don't know who that is. Saint Monkey says, Carter was the best person as a former president ever. Completely agree with that. John says, I can't wait for the big, beautiful obituary. I'm not going to say I disagree with that. Felipeg says he's the president of Colombia. I don't know enough about the government in Colombia and that fellow to opine on it. Harvey James says, Trump charged the government $250 million for 3 months of golf. There again. So yeah, every time Trump goes golfing, he always goes at one of his own golf courses, which means that the cost of putting all of those Secret Service agents at Mar-a-Lago, him staying at Mar-a-Lago, all of his team staying at Mar-a-Lago, all the food that they buy at Mar-a-Lago, all of that comes from the taxpayers. Nate S. says, how many billionaire funders fund the Democratic machine? I think 25% of all American billionaires fund Democrats, and 75% of all American billionaires fund the Republican Party. So the Republican Party is the party of the billionaire class. That is unquestionably accurate. Political Alpha says, is open border a good idea? I think maybe one day, but I don't think that it is today. And the border was not open during the Biden administration. That is misinformation. Curvy Accountant says he also does private business with foreign investors while on presidential business. That is 100% accurate. Him telling that one world leader, I forget, it was like the president of the Philippines or whatever, to go talk to Eric about some fucking land deal is him using the power of the government to enrich himself, which is, unconstitutional. Mr. Platadam says, bro, we will never see a president who fight more for American citizens. Let me tell you this as plainly as I can, Mr. Platadam. Every single president fought for Americans more than Donald Trump is fighting for Americans. He is actively hurting Americans. He is doing way more harm to Americans than potentially any president in history. Yeah. So ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Caleb Bratmill says, thoughts on focusing on mass automation while providing citizens with basic necessities. I think the most important thing that we have in government as we are moving into a world in which there are potentially 80% fewer jobs than there were before are things like universal basic income. Like, we need a government that is open to giving American citizens things for free. Because when there are 80% fewer jobs because of AI and automation, then there's going to be a lot of people who cannot afford food, rent, electric bills, healthcare, etc. And without programs like universal basic income, you're going to have a very testy population of people who cannot have their basic needs met. So yeah, we need to be voting for politicians that are open to that. Trump and the Republican Party are not open to that. They're just going to go tell you to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Less Than Optimal says, good afternoon. What do you think about the Grapers? I mean, the Grapers are like a more extreme version of like the Charlie Kirk Republican Party. And, the Charlie Kirk Republicans are already pretty extreme. So, the Grapers are all out there worshiping Nick Fuentes, who is like openly admitting to being a misogynist and a schnazi. So it's like, seems like a pretty bad move to me. Ecuadorian baseball pitcher says, Jarrett, you want me to be honest with nothing MAGA says matters in the long run. They can pretend it does all they want, but it doesn't matter. The universe doesn't care about their opinions. Life will still go on. Everything they say is meaningless. When we're talking about MAGA and we're talking about the Republican Party, I want to make it clear that the people who deserve the lion's share of the blame here are not the voters. It is the politicians, it is the money machine billionaires who are funding them, and it's the content creators. People like Ben Shapiro, Fox News commentators, and shit like that. The ones that are spreading this bullshit, even though they know better. So while I understand, the sentiment, Ecuadorian baseball pitcher, let's be a little bit more, empathetic, radical empathy for fellow voters. Golden Rao says, do you believe that there's a higher power or a higher group that people don't know about? The billionaire class is sort of like the ones that are pulling the strings globally, but people know about it. They're just not focused on it, I don't think. Terry says, where does the only come from frothing such as Snap? I think maybe you had some auto correct, some spell check errors there, Terry. So I'm not really sure what you're asking there. Caleb Brott Mills says, Ben Shapiro is done for real. Republicans have fully embraced anti-Semitism. Maybe, I don't know. Terry says, money. Where does the money come from for things like Snap? Taxes. People pay taxes, and then the government takes some of those taxes and uses it to pay for programs like like SNAP and welfare and Medicare and Medicaid, etc. Lisa Calcagano says, do you think unredacted fellow with the island files will ever be released? I don't know. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino have had their hands on all that information for a really long time, and I do not trust them to not redact, alter, doctor, or destroy those records if it makes people like Donald Trump look bad. Kyle Van Lanningham says, didn't the Social Democrats in 33 Germany do this whole vote thing? Didn't work then. So I couldn't tell you a lot about specific historical things that happened in Germany in the 1930s. But I can tell you this, that America 2025 is not Germany 1933 as much as Donald Trump and his buddies would love for it to be. And so while we still have the power to vote and organize and protest and strike and boycott, and put pressure on elected representatives and businesses and recruit and door knock, we should be doing it. Yeah, I don't believe that the Schnauzy Party were called the Social Democrats. I think they were called the National Socialists, weren't they? Yeah. Anyways, Isabel says, "What do you think future presidential election will look like? Certain side that has a better chance." I mean, I'm concerned about the way that Trump is going to try to cheat to win the 28 presidential election. But so yeah, it's going to be weird and it's going to be chaotic potentially, and people are going to have to do a lot of work to make sure that everything is free and fair going forward. Caden Whitaker says, "What do you think about people dying, suffering heart disease from the vaccines?" Caden, the risk of dying a terrible death from heart disease from vaccines is smaller than the risk of dying from a painful death from the disease that the vaccines are trying to prevent you from getting. So I would much rather take my chances on the 0.5% that the vaccine is going to give me a heart problem than the, I don't know, 30-40% chance that I get one of those terrible diseases and die that way. Golden Rao says, "Can you name your top 5 most honest people?" I like Tim Burchett and Luna. I don't know. I don't know if we. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could do that. Stu Fred says, "You think this term will end more violently than Trump's first?" I don't know. That depends entirely on the work that people like you and me do. If we sit back and we allow Trump to weaponize the military, punish dissent, enable ICE to go into blue cities and steal ballot boxes and intimidate voters and shit like that, then potentially, absolutely. But if we do the work of stopping those encroachments on our personal liberties, then I do not believe that they will be violent because we will have effectively, been able to stop his escalatory agenda. Shork says, "Do you respect celebrities who are afraid to get political?" No, I do not. Golden Rouse says, "Name 3 honest people. What's the challenge? 3 people you believe in to be honest." Pretty simple. I mean, if I say anybody, someone's going to find some thing where they're going to be like, "What about when they said this?" And I'm going to be like, "I don't know. I didn't see that." Lisa Kakagano says, "Trump just said he has no plans to strike within Venezuela. Do you think he's lying?" Yes, 100% he's lying. Ariana D says, "The Republicans use the nuclear option to pass the bill." I actually don't know. I found it so strange, such a weird self-own that Trump admitted that the Republican Party could use the filibuster to open the government back up. He basically just said, "We have been artificially extending the shutdown by not negotiating with the Democrats, by not allowing House business to go forward, sending the House on recess, threatening to withhold SNAP funding and shit like that." So yeah, I don't know. I think Trump putting it out there is suggesting that he wants to get rid of the filibuster potentially because he wants the Republican Party to pass other legislation that the filibuster is currently getting in the way of. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's possible. It's possible. Bucko Princess. I hope Prince Andrew spills the beans on Trump now that he has been stripped of his titles and perks. I don't know. I think he's probably worried about what happened to the fellow with the island in prison happening to him. David Folk says, "Whose fault is the shutdown? Each side just blaming each other." So David Folk, are you still here? Because I want to make sure that you hear my answer before I get into it. And Golden Rao, stop spamming the comments or I will block you. Let's see here. Sasuke says, "Bring back not giving a shit about politics." I would love to, Sasuke, but unfortunately, there's all these fucking psychopaths in the government who are trying to throw dissenters into concentration camps. And so I think it's probably an important time to be focused on politics and to actually give a shit about politics. So yeah, David Folk, are you still here? Fantastic. Okay. So the shutdown basically comes down to this. Because of cuts that the Republican Party made in the big beautiful bill, everybody's health insurance costs are going to skyrocket in 2026. And the Democratic Party is saying, we refuse to be a part of business as usual. And so we are not going to sign on to this funding bill unless you include extending healthcare subsidies into 2026. And so the Republican Party is saying, no, we're not going to do that. And the Democrats said, but everybody's healthcare costs will go up. And the Republicans said, yeah, we don't care. And so the Democrats were like, all right, well, then we're not going to sign on to the resolution and we're going to shut down the government. And then, well, I shouldn't say we're going to shut down the government. I should say the government will then be shut down. And the Republican Party said, cool, that sounds great. We love it when Americans suffer. We can either make them suffer from inflated healthcare costs or we can make them suffer by shutting down the government. Either way is gravy for us. Barn Dog says, what are your thoughts on NGOs as a means to launder money? How prevalent do you think it is? Honestly, I'm not really sure about where NGOs work in that, but crypto is basically the world's most perfect money laundering machine. So, Caden Whitaker says, why is it that being Republican opens you to violence more than being a minority or a liberal? Caden Whitaker, that is blatantly untrue. That is demonstrably false. I think any human being should be able to see that that is not an accurate thing that you are saying. No Way Jose says, does this include private insurance through employers? So in the short term, no. In the long term, yes. But because if a bunch of people no longer can afford insurance, those people are then going to flood into emergency rooms to get emergency care instead. That is going to eventually trickle down to being to making all of our healthcare costs more expensive. Quinn says, I just heard that some federal judges ordered Trump to pay food stamps tomorrow. I saw that reporting as well, and I really hope that it is accurate. JP Real, good to see you again. Says, is Trump moving into the same place as Biden won? As far as like senior moments and stuff. I don't know. I think that Trump, even at this enfeebled moment of his life, is still a more engaging communicator than Biden was in 2021. So as much as I would love to believe that his brain is turning even more into mush, I think we're probably going to see the same old idiocy from Trump, going forward. Dano 23 says federal judges have control of the president. So that is not true, Dano. In the way that the government is structured, it's supposed to be a power sharing mechanism where Congress has some power, the president has some power, and the judiciary has some power as well. The judiciary is the only branch of the three branches of government that is reining in the excesses of the Trump administration, where Congress, because it's run by Republicans, they've thrown their hands up and they're like, yeah, Trump, do whatever the fuck you want, have fun, go crazy. So some judges are standing up to Trump in a way that Congress also should be doing, but that does not mean that the judges control the presidency. Curvy Countess says rural hospitals also depend on this money. Republicans refuse to continue in this so-called CR. That is accurate. That's going to hurt a lot of people. A lot of rural hospitals are going to close down because of this shit. User a bunch of numbers says Trump wants to look like he saved us from the disaster he created? 100%. Buckaroo, I saw that comment. I read that comment. So stop putting it. Alpinist says comedian giving medical advice. No, I'm not. I'm talking about politics. Ready. Kayla Britt Mills says, what do you think are the odds that Trump will try to run for a third term? I would put it at 100%. I would bet the house on that. Blar says, ACA will crumble. Republicans love that. I mean, the politicians are going to love it. The Republicans that are currently getting their health care through ACA are going to fucking hate it. Caden Whitaker says, question. And then there was no question after that. Mike Green says, is it really a clean CR? I've heard some people say that it's not. I have no idea. Nova says, scares them from doing so. I also bet the fact that judges that stand up to Trump get their houses firebombed scares them from doing so. Yeah, 100% Nova. Like, we should be mad that Trump is inciting his followers to attack judges that stand up against him. Like, that is psychotic. It is wildly irresponsible and dangerous. And the fact that there are judges that are still putting their fucking asses on the line to do what's right for America, like, they deserve all of our praise, respect, and support. Caden says, not firsthand. Don't know what that means. Sam says, do you think the Trump supporters are at the right for getting mad at the EBT users? No, I do not think that Trump supporters are correct for getting mad at EBT users. Let's see here. JP says, you own a house you can bet on stand-up's earnings? No, I do not own a house. It was a metaphor, I'll bet my rented apartment. is what I should have said, I suppose. Pam says China and Russia defending Venezuela. We are vulnerable to their covert actions. That is interesting, Pam. I have not heard anything about China and Russia's stance on Trump trying to start a war in Venezuela, and knowing how his relationship to Putin and his relationship to Xi is, I'm very curious to see how that fucking all plays out. Bren says a lot of EBT users are Trump supporters. That is accurate. CS says a lot of ACA users are from red states. You guys are spitting the truth here in my chat right now. So yeah, the Trump administration, Republican Party, they're hurting every American, including and especially their own voters. But they are betting that the propaganda and misinformation networks are so powerful that even as they are actively taking a dump on their own voters, they can use those information tools to convince them that the reason why poop is now on their head is not because of their own butts being above them, but trans kids and immigrants and Democrats and poor people and brown people, etc. Lika says, I thought Putin sent soldiers and war aircraft earlier in the week to Venezuela. I did not hear that. Luke says, do you believe we should have an open border? I don't believe we should have an open border. We haven't had an open border in a really long time. The border was not open during the Biden administration. I can see a world in which open borders are not a big deal. And I think that may be a good, cool world. Mike Green says, was Social Security only meant to be temporary? I do not know the history there, but I'm pretty sure that it has become an entrenched part of society. Pam says Russia sent mercenaries, Wagner Group, to Venezuela. Ooh, I haven't heard that, Pam. I'm gonna take it with a grain of salt because I don't really know you, but yeah, I will give it a Google and see. Okay, but Short says, is it no longer possible for the U.S. to compete with China's long-term plans? I mean, it's possible, but Trump is making it a lot harder. He is making it a lot more difficult. He is giving China our most advanced artificial intelligence chips. So the one advantage that we had in our technological war with China, like they're kicking our ass in so many other ways. The only advantage that we have is we have a bit of a head start in terms of artificial intelligence. And Trump is eliminating that advantage by giving them chips to end the trade war that he started. Like, it's so fucking stupid. Nova says, is it true our intelligence and doctors are leaving? Yes, there is a massive brain drain happening in America right now because doctors, professors, scientists, they are not getting the support that they need from our government, and in some cases are actively being suppressed and oppressed. Stewart says, if Republicans had 5 more votes, the benefits would be funded. The only reason we don't is Democrats. That is not true, Stewart. The benefits are supposed to be funded regardless of if the government is open or not. And it is the Republican Party that is threatening to take that away for illegal reasons. And a judge just said that they cannot do that. Short says Terrence Tao is the best mathematician alive and soon leaving the U.S. I didn't know that. Saint Monkey says can't blame them for leaving. I mean, if I would, I could. Okay. Kirby Countess says they have mostly turned against Donald Trump. That is accurate. Randy says BS. What did you think I said that was inaccurate, Randy? Alrighty. Sam. Tina says, wow, disingenuously bankrupt too. Who is? Sam says, aren't the people complaining about the protests of No Kings the same people who tried to get... I think the end of that sentence was, you think I am being disingenuously bankrupt, Tina. What do you think that I said that was disingenuous or morally bankrupt? I'm out here trying to fucking advocate for people, Tina. Yeah, but let me know. Let me know what you think. What you think I said that was inaccurate. Luke says, what do you think we could do with the billions that Trump is sending to Israel to fund G-side? I mean, I don't know, universal health care? Stewart says, you just lie, moving on. Cool, don't let the door hit your ass on the way out as you leave. Abe Obama Gold says, who's going to win Virginia? I have no idea. I hope it's the Democrat. Pam says, Trump Jr. Company got a military contract, 20,000 drones, parts all made in China, no tariffs due. Well, isn't that interesting, Pam? And that one I do know is accurate. So how about that? Sasuke says, don't let this distract you. Hector's going to be running 3 Honda Civics with spoon engines. What the fuck does that mean? Barn Dog says, how important for the future of our economy is artificial intelligence? That's a really good question, Barn Dog, and I'm not 100% sure. Um, right now, smart people are all saying that our economy is being propped up by a house of cards, resting on top of an AI bubble. And so while being in the lead on this technology is going to be necessary and potentially essential for things like national security, it is going to usher in a massive sea change as far as like what American life looks like. Like what kind of jobs are available? How are people going to be able to afford to live and stuff like that? I got a weird cowlick happening in my hair here. So yeah, I don't know. On the one hand, it is going to explode unemployment. On the other hand, it's like, this is the only thing that is propping up our economy right now. It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. It's fucking weird as hell. As far as like the economy of the future, yeah, I could not even begin to guess. So sorry about that. Tina says you're scared to take the challenge. Scrolling up. So yeah, you didn't say anything before that, so I don't know what that means. You're so disingenuous. You're scared of the challenge. You just said you were 100% on. Yeah, Tina, what you're saying doesn't make any sense. Either ask a question or I'm going to boot you. Bobby the Baby says, who is likely Democratic presidential nominee for 28? I don't know, Bobby. I say let's try to get everybody focused on the midterms in 26. Sam says, is immigration considered a civil crime, or is ICE at the right to treat them all like criminals? I don't believe so, Sam. I don't think that what ICE is doing is legal, constitutional, moral, humanitarian, or anything like that. But as far as like if it's a civil crime or some other category, I don't really know for certain. Thank you, Bobby the Baby. I appreciate you. Okay. All right. Christopher K says LMAO Spoon Engine was a Fast and Furious reference. What, Spoon Engine? Was that in 8 when they're in Cuba and he has to like race and Toretto has to race in that one jalopy in Cuba? Is that what that's a reference to? Sarah Johnson says, "Are you personally pro or against globalization?" That's a hard one. It feels so inevitable. It feels silly to be anti-globalization. Like, if we're going to be moving towards global peace, global prosperity, global cooperation, I think that goes hand in hand potentially with globalizing our industries. Um, yeah, I think it's probably a close game, but I think I would come down more on the side of pro, if only because I don't think there's any stopping it. You know. Okay, Harvey James says, are Trump's tariffs hurting this country or is it helping us? Hurting, without a question. Idaho Joe, do you think you're biased? I think everyone's being biased. I will tell you guys when I say things that are opinions, and I will tell you guys when I'm saying things that are facts. But yeah, I am not blind to the sin and mistakes of the Democratic Party. I just think that the sins and mistakes of the Republican Party are so much greater that it's way more important that we focus on those. Okay, Kurt says, I and National Guard after the local law are supposed to solve people. No, I believe that's accurate. Such a wildfire says that it's a misdemeanor. I'm pretty sure that's accurate. Jay Juror Nassman said, I don't know if it's criminal or similar, but then say it's not legal what ICE is doing. Say I don't know. I know that what ICE is doing is not legal. They are asking for people's papers. They are shoving people into detention centers without due process. They are detaining and deporting citizens, veterans, Native Americans, legal residents, like fucking you name it. They are doing atrocities. They are doing like fucking SS Gestapo shit, and I know that's illegal. Whether or not overstaying your visa is a criminal or a civil or a misdemeanor or whatever, like that does not change the depth of wrongness of what ICE is doing. Ooh, all right, JR, congratulations. You are out of here. It's the Rocketeer jumping ship here from the Purple Place to let you know the audio is choppy. Yeah, I did see that. Is it still like that, Rocketeer, or has it fixed itself? Because I'm no longer getting those notifications. Mel, happy Halloween to you as well. Whitney Rose, his thoughts on the major donors of the ballroom all being big tech companies. I'm not sure if they are all big tech companies, Whitney Rose, but it is concerning. It is concerning that, all of these massive corporations and billionaires are bribing Trump with a golden ballroom for what kind of favors from the president of the United States? This is an administration that is open to full on corruption and grifting. So yeah, I've got no faith that this is happening above board. Dom Jones says everyone believes in some version of universal health care. We just disagree on the scope of who gets our money. Interesting, Dom Jones. Say more about that, Dom, because I think I agree with you, but I'm not 100% sure. Ruthie says, what do you think are the chances Trump will provoke unrest to try to stay in power in 2028? I think that's 100%, Ruthie. Saint Monkey says, every person in the U.S. has the right to due process. Look it up. That is 100% accurate. D. Lind 68 says, proof, ? D. Lind, send me a DM asking for proof for whatever it is that you want proof of, and I will happily send it to you. I can almost guarantee that you won't do that, though, because people that ask for proof are mostly don't really give a shit. Okay. Observe Games says, assuming Trump continues to use ICE the same way he has for the next few years, is there a metric we can point to show that we are not doing better economy-wise with less immigrants? I don't know if there's one specific metric. I think there's specific examples of we can see these farms are suffering from a labor shortage. We can see that these restaurants have closed down. But yeah, one specific data point that I don't know. I'm so sorry. It's Rocketeer says, I saw a video yesterday that's okay. Let me see if this helps. There's still issues happening over there. It's Rocketeer says a video yesterday that posited that the ballroom is actually a front for a data center being built where the secure bunker is under the White House, and the press and the corpos are paying for access. I've seen that theory as well, and I don't know if it's true. It's a fun conspiracy theory, but there's a bunch of weird things about that ballroom. But I have not seen a theory that I'm willing to sort of bet the farm on yet. Trenty says, well, if it ain't my new political science professor. What's up, Trenty? Good to see you again. Greg Campbell says, Trump 2028. I got a feeling that this person is not here in good faith. Bobby the Baby says, we need more people who can separate facts from opinions. I agree with that. Okay, Dom Joe says, everyone will let a stranger pay for their life-saving surgery, but not everyone will pay for a stranger. Oh, that's interesting, Dom Jones. I mean, yes, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting philosophical way of viewing things. But yeah, I don't know how relevant that is to the political conversation, but it's interesting. Curvy Countess says, Google what unconstitutional acts has the Trump administration committed? Yeah, everybody should do that. Richard says, what is the definition of bipartisan? I guess the definition of bipartisan would be at least one member of both parties signing on to something. Scrolling down to the bottom, looks like a broom emoji, says, where do you stand? I stand on the side of truth and equality and justice. I'm a progressive Democrat. Okay, scrolling up. JP Real says, the weird thing is how many Christians won't feed the hungry. That is one of the weird things, JP. Ooh, excuse me, everybody. Trenty says, any news or updates on the government shutdown? I have not seen any movement. Trump just admitted on Truth Social that the Republicans could end the shutdown yesterday by getting rid of the filibuster, which is a point that every Republican politician was contesting as inaccurate, like Mike Johnson. So I think that's pretty interesting. So yeah, I don't know. Looks like a broom emoji says, are you for capitals or socialism? So capitalism, socialism, communism are all systems that can work together. In fact, we have all three in America right now. I personally think that we have a little bit too much capitalism, and we need to rebalance that with a little bit more socialism and a little bit more communism, in my opinion. Like, they have more socialism in any country that has universal health care, and I think we need some of that. Let's see here. Broomstick emoji says, we have socialism? We absolutely do. Socialism is basically just we all pay taxes, and then the government uses those taxes to pay for things that theoretically help every American. So the post office, public education, the fire department, the police department, public parks, the military, all of that is essentially socialism in America. Super Mario says they have to be shut down due to certifying the Democrat that got elected. Yeah, I mean, that is another one of the advantages of the government shutdown for Republicans, is that they do not have to seat the Democrat that was elected in Arizona. Dom Joe says the tube universal is political in healthcare, but no one would let their child die because of money. That is accurate. Dom Joe says, hence the existence of GoFundMe. Yes, 100%. Alrighty, let's see here. You staying in the place where you live, Dan Blackroyd? Well, now face north. Think about direction. Wonder why you have it now, Dan. Mine says, what does it mean when they say the separation of church and state? Excellent question, Mine. So what that means basically is that the government is not allowed to tell you which religion you have to practice, or even that you have to practice any religion. And the government is not allowed to pass laws that force people to do things for religious purposes. For example, it would be against the doctrine of church and state for a child going to public school being forced to pray, for example. Some might argue, and I would argue this point, that abortion bans, because of a religious objection to abortion, are a violation of church and state. So yeah, it can get a little bit wonky depending on how far in the weeds you want to go. Like, is this a legislation that somebody is putting forward because they believe it is the religiously right thing to do, or they just think it's good policy for America? Like, you know, it can be a little legalese if you try to go too far into the weeds with that. But it basically just says, like, you can't force me to practice your religion, and the government can't force me to practice their religion, stuff like that. Alrighty. CS says, will JD be the first VP who gets divorced while in office? I have heard that rumor also, CS, and it's fucking bananas, CS. Good lord. They're so fucking messy, guys. It's like fucking watching Real Housewives, Alrighty. Let's see here. Super Mario says food aid funds and emergency funds for government shutdown might be gone with this administration. I mean, a judge just ruled that they're not allowed to do that, so I guess we'll see what happens there. Shork says, does it matter that there are almost no black leaders in the Republican Party? I think it should, but who knows? If the propaganda networks are successful, they will make it not important. They will direct everyone's attention from facts like that should turn people off of the Republican Party. Okay. Dude, Trenty says, when Elon went slashing departments, was he unbiased with his choices, or was he partisan to one group? He was 100% not unbiased in his choices, Trenty. He was shutting down government programs that very specifically were investigating his companies, and also government programs that were protecting consumers against giant corporations. So, like, getting rid of the Consumer Financial Protection Board, for example, there is no good reason to do that unless you are a billionaire or own a massive corporation that would very much like to fuck over customers. Alrighty. Freedom Hunter says, bullshit. Is there anything that I said specifically that you think was inaccurate, Freedom Hunter? Let me know. Notification says, thoughts on billionaires. I do not believe that it is a moral thing to do to hoard wealth. So every billionaire, regardless of how they got that money, whether it was Taylor Swift or the Koch brothers, just having $1 billion is immoral. There are some people who got their billions through worse means. Like, I find the Koch brothers to be significantly more evil than a Taylor Swift or a George Soros or a Warren Buffett, but just having that amount of money is bad. Additionally, a lot of billionaires will try to use their money to entrench their
power and wealth by trying to influence politics. And so that is another reason why we should not let people have $1 billion, because then they will use their money to elect politicians that will cut their taxes like the Republican Party does, and then they get to be even richer and even richer after that. So yeah, if having $1 billion didn't hurt the economy, didn't hurt people who were starving, and did not make our political process worse, then I would say, yeah, sure, have $1 billion. But the fact of the matter is that it does all three of those things. Right, Ruthie says, do you think Gen Z is leaning more right, more left, or equally split? So I've seen reporting, some polling that says that the love affair between Gen Z and the Republican Party is over. I'll believe it when I see it. The Republican Party and the billionaire class that are working with them have done a really good job of infiltrating certain networks, like, for example, online gaming, where they can then take young men who have been radicalized by a capitalist government that is oppressing them into channeling that into more right-wing authoritarian rage. So convincing them, for example, that, oh, the reason why you're not a billionaire with a supermodel wife is not because, we defunded your public education and you weren't able to go to college, or not because we are not paying your dad enough to send you to college, but it's because of immigrants and poor people, and women aren't having sex with you because of feminism and shit like that. And so, I don't know if any, mechanisms to counter that, how successful they are, or even how many there are. Are they well funded enough? Like, I have no idea. I do know that that billionaire machine is still churning. It is still churning out the propaganda. It is still radicalizing young men to be more right-wing extremist, authoritarian, people. And so I'm hoping that people are doing the work of countering that. I just don't know if they are. Totem says, where did Trump get the $40 billion for Argentina? He stole it from the taxpayers. Christina says, fraud just means congressionally approved and funded programs and agencies that Trump politically opposed. That is accurate, Christina. Christina is referring to Doge. Broom emoji says, do you know about America's part in the Korean War? It's definitely not my area of expertise, Broom. Simon Mooncalf says, I don't care if people have a lot of money as long as it doesn't result in starving people. I agree with that. Also, don't use your money to try to influence politics, and, we'll be good as gravy. It's the Rocketeer says, no real black Republican leaders. Sounds about white. Very funny. It's the Rocketeer. JP says, there is a black leader in the Republicans, but he's a self-named schnazi and liked peeing on his sister-in-law. That has to be, I don't know if that's true or not. And even if it is true, I don't know if we have evidence that it's true, so we got to be really careful about alleged, peeing on sister-in-laws, that we are throwing around. Daniel Kingery says, does every registered voter vote in the U.S.? No, they do not. I think the last election was something like 80 million Americans didn't vote, and 30 million of them were registered already, so it would have been really easy for them to vote. Or maybe it was 50 million, I forget. Alrighty, let's see here. Sixers has been a lot. I speak to a lot of young people at the job I work at. 75% of them all vote for Trump. Ooh, that is concerning. Toilet plunger emoji says, it's a toilet plunger. Well, thank you for clarifying. CS says, do you support ending property taxes? CS, I'm not gonna take a position on that. I'm not 100% sure. My attitude, my philosophy on taxes is just this: the rich need to pay more, the poor need to pay less, and however that works out via property tax or sales tax or income tax, y'all mathematicians, y'all work it out. But the rich are paying too little and the poor are paying too much. Fletch Lives Again says, does your significant other share your passion for politics? We align on politics. My wife steps away from following politics for her own mental health, and so I'm kind of like the one who has to keep an eye on things. Okay, Notification says, can someone have $1 million? Where do you draw the line? So Notification, I don't know what the correct most amount of money a person can have is, but here's what I say. I say, let's set the limit at $900 million and see what happens. Maybe we can bring that number down even further, but no human needs $1 billion. There's no amount of effort that a human being has ever made to have earned $1 billion. Maybe an artist who is working their ass off doing like a world tour, like a Taylor Swift, maybe that counts as earning. Maybe a scientist who cures some disease, maybe that counts as earning $1 billion. But if you're just looking at like effort or contribution to mankind, I think almost nobody who has $1 billion earned that $1 billion. Okay. All right. Strappin' Young Man 907 says, do you think the situation with SNAP benefits are an example as to why socialism doesn't work? No, I do not believe that that is accurate. Strappin' Young Man 907, are you still here? Strappin' Young Man 907, let me know in the chat if you are still here, because I will happily get into that with you. Z Cero says, what's your opinion on UBI? I am for it, and in a world that is racing towards eliminating a ton of jobs through artificial intelligence and automation, I think UBI is not only a good policy, it is essential at this point in world history. Okay, Brent Morell says, so Taylor Swift earned her billions, but Elon Musk hasn't done shit to earn his. This is your position. You know, Brent, that is my position, my guy. That is my position. Elon Musk has never worked a fucking day in his life half as hard as Taylor Swift worked on one day of the Eras tour. You can fucking quote me on that, Brent. Yeah, Elon Musk doesn't fucking do shit. Elon Musk is a dude who has lied and cheated his way into stealing companies that he did not rightfully own. He's a fucking Nepo baby who was born with a fucking golden spoon in his mouth. Yeah, man. Yeah, 100%. Daniel Kingery says, you, as with many, are incorrect about whether every registered voter votes. Daniel, do you believe that every registered voter votes in America? Daniel, because that is pretty easy to debunk, Daniel, if that is something that you believe. Plunger Emoji says, are you on the actual left or are you a liberal? Liberalism is still technically on the right wing. I do know that some people describe it that way. I still think that if you are a neoliberal, liberal, centrist Democrat, you still count as being on the left. But if you want to say that they're technically right, then that's fine for me. Personally, I call myself a progressive Democrat. I would consider that to be a far left Democrat. I think that there are probably some tankies out there who believe that I am a neoliberal shill, and I think there are probably some centrist or Republicans out there who think that I am a socialist extremist or something like that. But I don't really truck with the semantic differences in those definitions. It's the Rocketeer says, excuse you, it was an emerald spoon in his mouth. Very funny. Somebody else made that joke. Was it you? Destined Porch also Destined Porch says it was a diamond spoon. Bobo says it was an emerald spoon. Excellent, guys. Baby with tinnitus says, America first, question mark? Dude says, what is the way of the future for politics? I have no idea. Ruthie says, is the Republican commentator that you would like to have a conversation with? I mean, I guess I would want to have a conversation with the Republican commentators who were, fucking hard in the paint for Republicans like Mitt Romney and George W. Bush, but who are now like hardcore anti-Republican Party, like Bill Kristol, for example, or there's another guy who I can't remember. He's at the Bulwark, I think. I can't remember that dude's name. But yeah, the only question I really want to ask them is, do you still think that Mitt Romney conservatism is the move, or has the dissent of the Republican Party convinced you that even that was bullshit? Righty. Trenty says, what can the Oversight Committee do when Attorney General Bondi and Kash Patel take the stand and mass deflect or misconstrue? So Trenty, that's a really good question. There are legal consequences for lying or obfuscating to Congress during an official investigatory hearing. The issue is that during Trump's first administration, Congress tried to impose those legal restrictions, and the Supreme Court delayed or obfuscated or Trump pardoned the people that were then subject to those legal ramifications. And so it doesn't have the same teeth that it should. It is still a very valuable tool that the Democrats could wield if they win the midterms in 2026. But we're not going to see like an immediate, it's not going to be like a light switch turning on as far as like these people are then going to have to start telling the truth and not being massive dicks on the stand. But it also will be, it'll allow them to direct investigations a little bit more. Like right now, the Democrats can only question people who the Republicans agree to have in, and on an investigation that Republicans agree to sign on to. So yeah, you know, I part of judicial reform and, you know, rebalancing the Supreme Court should be in, you know, reasserting the legal consequences for lying, obfuscating, and generally being a dick during congressional hearings. Good Trouble says, can you yodel? You're not the Good Trouble, are you? And I don't think I can. Daniel Kinnery says, are you interested in the evidence that proves every registered voter votes? Daniel, here's the thing. Here's the thing, my man. I know that that is not true. I know, like, this is my whole fucking thing, man. I am a voting rights activist. And so I can tell you exactly how many people vote and do not vote in this country. I can tell you that 60% of people who can vote in this country vote, and some of those people are registered. So I don't know what evidence you think you have that every registered voter votes, but I can tell you from the bottom of my heart that whatever evidence you have is inaccurate, because not every registered voter votes. In fact, a lot of registered voters do not vote. Chad Bitson says, do you mind sharing roughly how much you make for going live? Just considering it. I mean, if you're trying to do live streaming for the money, I would encourage you to do something else instead. I think I make something like $20 a month live streaming, and that is, you know, I kind of started with a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Like I had an advantage in getting started because I already had 100,000 viewers from making a bunch of videos that were popular. But and also I'm a touring stand-up comedian, and a lot of the comics that I work with are really popular, and sometimes their fans join my live streams. So if me with those advantages starting now is still only making $20 a month doing live streams, I would not look at that as a potential, you know, career path. But if it's something that you feel passionate about, I say fucking go for it, you know? Chad Bitson says, yikes, well, thanks for your contribution then. I guess it's charity, but we appreciate you. 100%. Yeah, I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because I want to do something about what is happening politically, and I think that this maybe is helping do that stuff, you know? Bone Mike Cat 420, no I will not, says, why are we talking about right versus left when they are both lobbied by Israel? So Bone My Cat, when you say things like both sides are lobbied by Israel, you are obfuscating the truth of the matter, which is that there are way more Democrats who refuse AIPAC money than there are Republicans. There are way more Democrats who vote to stop sending money and weapons to Israel than there are Republicans. As far as the two parties are concerned, standing up to Israel, standing up to AIPAC, not taking lobbying money, the Democratic Party is leagues better than the Republican Party is. And so I hope that you have heard that. And if you don't believe it, I hope you'll do a little research into it. But that is 100% accurate. Very funny. It's the Rocketeer says, oh my God, if it is the Good Trouble, that's a bigger cinematic event than the Avengers. That's very funny. Observe Games says, if a citizen wanted to run for president in 2028 as a Green Party candidate, is there a Green Party group that needs to give approval? Can someone just say they're running in a party without consulting anything? I believe that you would need to be the official nominee of the Green Party. You could potentially run. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that you could try to run in the primary for that party, and you wouldn't need their approval. But also, there's like certain things that you would need to do to get on the ballot. Like you would have to pay, I think, the party to include your name on the ballot or something like that. I don't know. And then those rules, I think, can also vary from state to state. So it's complicated, but generally speaking, no, you cannot. Z Sero says, do you think we'll abolish or switch to permanent daylight savings time? I don't know. Like, Trump is weirdly seems like he is open to that, but I'm not sure if there'll be any follow through on that, because he has the attention of a goldfish. Alrighty. MAGA Update says, why does it feel like one party is weaponizing hunger in the government shutdown? Because the Republican Party is weaponizing hunger in the government shutdown. Alrighty. Ruthie says, me too, but I don't feel smart enough. I don't know what that is in reference to, but I'm sure you're plenty smart, Ruthie. CS says, have you ever done political debates? Not officially, not on the internet. I sometimes will have political debates with my friends, or stuff like that. I used to get into a lot of fights online, with people, like in the comment section and stuff like that. And I'm not against doing political debates. I just don't advocate for them, and I'm not going to have them on my channel because I just think that they're stupid and unproductive, Daniel says, right now you only repeat about voting what benefits the present political system. Daniel, I suspected that you might be saying a lot of inaccurate things, and that comment basically confirms it for me. So I don't know what your vibe is politically, but I'm just going to beg you to try to be a little bit more fact-based going forward. Fletch Lives Again says, how long have you been doing lives like this? So I kind of put my live streaming into hyperdrive in the lead up to the 24 election. I want to say maybe like 4 months before the 24 election, I started doing 3 times a week, then 4 times a week, then eventually 5 times a week. But I was doing it a little bit beforehand, and it just kind of like took me a little while to circle around how much I like this and a good format and stuff like that. Osher says, do you endorse candidates' policies? Yeah, generally speaking, I don't know how much, like I endorse candidates like Mamdani and, and Sykot and, people that Katie Porter, people that I like a lot. I don't know if there's like an official Jarrett Berenstein endorsed badge that anybody's going to put on their websites or anything like that. All right, C. Cero says, so I'm an American in Canada. I vote whenever I can. It used to be free to send in my ballot, but this last time I had to pay postage now. It's not a major cost, but it's the principle of the matter. Do you think fully postage paid ballots will be a thing again, or did the tariff war screw that up, at least until someone else takes power? So the Republican Party in general, and Donald Trump very specifically, is hostile to voting rights. And so they're doing everything they can to suppress the vote, encourage people not to vote, to disenfranchise people. And, if they can get away with it, potentially just like outright stealing votes, throwing them away, voter intimidation, etc. Until we remove every Republican from office, peacefully, obviously, electorally, and, replace them with the Democrats, we are not going to see federal advancements in, things that make voting easier abroad, for example. So, yeah, I think you're probably SOL for the time being. And hopefully, when you mail in your vote for a Democratic politician, that person gets elected and they can start undoing some of the damage to try to get more people voting and make it easier for people to vote, etc. Check-in into 5150 says, this guy is communist. Don't listen because he's pushing for Democrats. I am not a communist. I am not a socialist. I am not a capitalist. I believe in a mixed system. Check into, if you do not ask a question, I will boot you. Fact-based, consent of the governed requires majority of known number to consent or person fails. Congratulations, Daniel. You are out of here. Flamingo Mo, good to see you again. Check into says, why don't you tell the truth? I always do. Curvy Countess says, have you read Red Rising series by Pierce Brown, not Piss Brown? No, I have not. Trenty says, child labor stealing patents via arbitration. What? I don't know anything about that. Ruthie says, what of the Democratic Party doing that you don't like? I don't like old politicians, digging their fingers in and trying to stay in power long past their expiration date. I think the Democratic Party needs to be doing more to encourage younger politicians, more progressive politicians. If your philosophy is hey, I'm a centrist Democrat. I believe that some of these far left policies go too far. God bless you, you know. But I don't think that we should be elevating you to the position where you can, you know, put the brakes on younger progressive candidates. You know, like let the voters decide in the primaries. Don't put your finger on the scale for candidates before the primary. Um, and yeah, you know, like let's make sure that we have cool new young people at the helm. You know, get rid of the wait your turn mentality. You know, shit like that. Ready, Chuck Schumer, time to retire, not aggressive enough. Completely agree with that. Osher says, what is the edgiest policy idea that you agree with? The edgiest policy that I agree with. If there was enough support in America to basically make owning any kind of gun illegal, then I would support that. I understand that there are a lot of people in this country, even people in the Democratic Party, even people on the far left, who do not want to do anything that would restrict people's right to own guns, maybe like some gun safety legislation, but they're like, I love my guns, people should be able to get guns, let them, you know, blah, 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 blah. But if there was enough support for, you know, like getting rid of the Second Amendment, you know, having way harsher, you know, what do you call it? A harder barrier to entry for gun ownership. That's probably my edgiest policy that I support. Nick says, do you know information about the DJI drone ban coming soon? No, I do not know about that. CS says, do you support age limits for all branches of government? I suppose, you know, like there are certain things that happen to you as you get older and you become more responsible and knowledgeable. Or do you mean like an upper limit? And yes, 100% I do support an upper limit. Thank you, Asher, for being here. Ace says you should be able to run at 25 and can't be in office past 55. 55 feels a little low to me. Maybe we can make that like 70 or something. Fletch Lives Again says, was Chuck Schumer more aggressive when he was younger? I honestly have no idea. You know, a couple of fun facts about Chuck Schumer that I know, he has literally never lost an election. I think that's kind of interesting. But yeah, aggressive, I don't know. He's always seemed just like some sort of, ever since he's been on my radar, he's just always seemed like a very nice old man. You know, like not aggressive, not too progressive, just you know, just like a nice old guy, you know, stuff like that. Ruthie says, who would you like to see on the ticket in 2028? I always punt on that question. I'm just trying to get people focused on 26, Ruthie. Davey said, do you feel like we are more likely to get into World War III under a Democrat or Republican president? Republican, full stop, absolutely hands down. Alrighty. Lika says, James Tallarico, Democrat for president. I like James Tallarico. He sounds a little bit too much like a politician for my taste, but seems cool policy-wise. Harvey James says, can we turn the tides in the Supreme Court to get less conservative judges? 100% Harvey James, but you know how we do that? You know how we do that, man? We gotta elect more Democrats, and we gotta keep them there longer. You know, we can't have this every 2 years Congress switches hands. We can't have this every 4 years the presidency changes hands. If we actually want to get some sort of Supreme Court reform, we need to give Democrats the majority in the Senate by a lot so that they have wiggle room in case there's another centrist Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema type that wants to gum up the works for, you know, rebalancing the court. Captain Cosplay says, is democracy an American value? I believe so. CS, it's not pack the court, it's rebalance the court. The Republican Party packed the court. We're going to fix the court. We're going to rebalance the court. Flamingo Mo says, how are Schumer's imaginary friends Joe and Eileen Bailey doing? What in the world is that a reference to? I have no fucking idea. JP says Red Rising is pretty good. Yeah, I'll check that out. Osher says, what do you think about the hate on Graham Plattner? So as a Jewish American, I am able to say how I feel about somebody having a Nazi tattoo. I am not a Black American, so I'm not a woman, and so I am not able to say whether or not he should be forgiven for the things that he said on Reddit that were like little racist, a little fat phobic, shit like that. It's also not I'm also not able to say how racist, what he put on there was. But as a Jewish American, I believe his explanation for his tattoo. I believe that this is a dude who was in the fucking military. He was in the shit. He's got all sorts of fucking PTSD. He was young. He was out drinking with his buddies. He got a tattoo that looked badass, but he didn't know what it meant. And then he either learned what it meant and kept it ironically and didn't think it was a big deal because nobody's seeing him with his shirt off who really gives a shit, or he learned about it recently and then got it covered up because he recognized that it was in bad taste. Yeah, I think it is worse for somebody who is a Republican politician or running to be a Republican politician having a questionable tattoo and Reddit history, because the party that they're associating themselves with is the party of racism and anti-Semitism, the KKK, neo-Nazis, etc. So, Pete Hegseth having a fucking Christian nationalist tattoo or whatever the fuck that he had, that reflects potentially his real beliefs that he is hiding from the public. But Graham Plattner is running to be a progressive Democratic Socialist candidate potentially in Maine. And I just don't buy that guy is a secret Nazi or a secret racist or a secret misogynist. I don't think that you run on that kind of platform if that is how you feel. I mean, we get tricked sometimes. Kristen Sinema ran as a progressive, and then she just ended up selling out. Something happened to fucking Fetterman's noodle when he had a stroke or some shit like that. I don't fucking know. But yeah, I don't live in Maine, so it's not up to me to decide whether or not that guy gets to be the nominee. It's up to the voters in Maine. Righty. Anti-fascist says he was interviewed on MSC. I believe the man. I take him at his word. Yeah, I do too. Let's see here. JP says Joe and Elaine Bailey are Schumer's fake average voters that he has talked about many, many times. Oh, yeah. I had no idea that was one of his regular go-tos. A friend of mine, Chuck Schumer, gave the commencement address at his college, and he went out there and he had a speech, like a piece of paper, and he says, "You know what? I have this really long speech that I was planning on giving to you guys, but I can look out at you and I can tell you don't need some old guy telling you what to do." And he rips up the speech in front of everybody and he goes, "Get out there and live your lives, and you're smart. You don't need old people telling you what to do. God bless you. Good luck going future, and congratulations on graduating college." And everybody loses their mind. And then that guy talked to like somebody in the Schumer campaign and was like, "Yeah, he does that sometimes if he books like too many colleges in a row. He'll fucking do that," which I think is kind of funny and also kind of shitty. Anyways. Okay, No Way Jose says Plattner looks like the type that would backstab the Democrats. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that. Oscar says I totally agree. The hate seems manufactured from the corporate media. I mean, there's also potentially, people on the right or the billionaire class trying to incentivize intra-party conflict within the Democrats, or centrist Democrats trying to push out a potential charismatic progressive. They don't want any more AOCs, and so they're using this Oppo research to take them down. Like, I don't know who's necessarily behind it. It is just up to us to decide whether or not what they are doing is working. And it's not working on me. Hazmat Scotty says, "Why is the left all about violence?" We're not, Hazmat Scotty. There was a MAGA supporter who murdered a bunch of Democratic politicians in, I think, Minnesota not too long ago. So not really sure where you come down on that, Hazmat Scotty. CS says, "Why don't the Dems do what the Republicans do and pose as a MAGA, then flip when elected?" I don't know. It's an interesting proposition. Somebody who has no social media presence, moving to a red state, running as a MAGA Republican, and then flipping the switch. Sounds like a pretty interesting idea for somebody to potentially do. I don't know. Let's see here. Shooting star emoji says, "Sounds like elite ruling class money laundering to me." What does? User a bunch of numbers says, "Why can't we live together united? I think people forget politics should benefit all, Republican and Democrat." I completely agree with that. Oh, Shooting Star says, "Now in modern era, through lobbyist groups, we are sending billions to research genders of animals." Oh, gotcha. I suspected that you might be saying things that were weird and not true. Shooting Star. So yeah, we're not spending billions to research the genders of animals. Shooting Star. Sometimes scientific research sounds strange, and then it ends up being the most effective anti-cancer drug. So we can't judge these research projects by how silly they sound. Also, a lot of those research projects were manufactured by Elon Musk and Doge to make the cuts that he was making seem silly. So I would encourage you to get your sources, your what do you call it? I would encourage you to get your information from other sources. Hazmat Scotty says that's 1 out of the last 25 violent attacks. Try again. Hazmat Scotty, the FBI's own research says that most political violence comes out of the right than the left. The only successful political assassinations of, I think, the last 100 years or so have been right against left. So if you don't ask a question, you're out of here. I don't think that I'm going to convince you that you're wrong about this, but you are. Like, you are definitely 100% wrong about this. Alrighty. Christina says, this month, the home of the Virginia judge who ruled against the Trump administration exploded. Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting also. Alrighty, everybody. All right, I went extremely long today. You're welcome, everybody. I don't know. I just had a little extra pep in my step today. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for all the questions, the support, the gifts, and the questions and the shares and stuff like that. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. My schedule is usually pretty up to date, both on my website and on my TikTok calendar and on my Twitch calendar. So, if you're ever wondering when my next live stream is going to be, you can definitely check that out there. Thank you, Ruthie. I appreciate you. If there are any questions that you have that I was not able to answer here on the live stream, DMs are open. You can email me through my website. You can get in touch via my Discord. I do respond to messages because I want to be a resource for you guys, whether for, to educate you about what the government is doing or to direct you toward great organizations to volunteer for or to donate to. I want to be that resource for you guys. I want to get you involved in politics. I want to make you a voter. I want to make you somebody that recruits other voters and convinces other people to go vote. And so if I can be that resource for you, I want to be. So use me and abuse me. Use me until I am all used up. The Discord is a great resource also because that's where I put recommendations for podcasts and books and also great organizations to volunteer for. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know we're all struggling these days. I have a Patreon that you can join for as little as $1 a month. I have a store that you can buy things from as well. Link to both of those things in my bio. And also you can send gifts on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube and become super subscribers and stuff like that. There's all sorts of fun, ways that you can send me money if you like to send me money. I can't believe I didn't reach my live goal this week. That's really weird. Today, I mean. What was the other thing I was going to tell you guys about? The Patreon and something else. Oh! One of the benefits of being a $10 member on the Patreon is that once a month I send you weird thoughts that I had while I was gardening, if you know what I mean. And so I think it was only like a handful of people that are taking advantage of that, but the new gardening thoughts is due tomorrow. I'm very excited about putting that out on the Patreon. And lastly, guys, just my heartfelt plea that you guys all do the work, because it is only through us doing the work that we're going to be able to get out of this. We are not going to be saved. There is no group that is powerful enough or rich enough to come to our rescue here. It has to be us. It has to be us doing the work. That is how we get out of this. Okay, everybody. Happy Halloween. Have an excellent weekend. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. And I will see you guys on Monday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye.